This novelization feels like it was written by a fan. And I mean, it was. It was written by Paul Cornell, but it doesn't feel like it's the same person who wrote Human Nature or created Bernice Summerfield. Constantly referring to the First Doctor as the First Doctor doesn't really read very well, and it doesn't work in a fiction setting. It just falls into the same hole that Planet of the Ood does by barely scratching the surface of the source material. Everything here feels very simple. There's barely any reading into anything and barely any new material added. And it feels like more of a waste of time to read it more than anything. And it's odd, obviously, because of how well received Paul Cornell usually is when it comes to being a writer. My only assumption is that it's because it's not his original story, as he doesn't try to reframe any meaningful moments or even redo any jokes. Twice Upon a Time is a very Stephen Moffat story, and whilst I'm sure it's quite difficult to stray away from that, it just feels like I could be watching the episode instead. In fact, one of the jokes that Paul Cornell adds is that the Doctor has a VHS recording of the Daleks' master plan that he has to return to someone. That doesn't make any sense. What do you mean? Cornell also added to one of the very Moffat jokes, the like search history joke, that River Song has been sending him cat pictures. I don't want to read into that. I don't want to know what that means. I don't want to have even read that, but it exists. So now everyone knows that River Song sends the 12th Doctor at least cat pictures. I'm just leaving that there. But aside from all of that, all the dialogue is written in exactly the same way that provides the exact same emphasis as the actors did in the episode, italicized and stuff like that, where it's specifically written so you read it like they said it in the episode. I'm not saying you can't do that for iconic moments and whatever. You don't want to change major stuff, but why is just all the regular dialogue reading exactly how it would do in the episode? I don't understand why someone would choose then to read this instead of just watch the episode. This will take you more than 45 minutes to read for most people, I would imagine, and there is no benefit to it. If anything, all I come away with is knowing that River Song sends the 12th Doctor cat pictures, and that's not exactly something I needed to know. So why did Paul Cornell do this? Like, I don't know if he just maybe didn't want to or what. Like, I know obviously, so this came out as around, like, it was one of the first reintroductions to the Target book line, with Rose, the Christmas Invasion, the Day of the Doctor. And Stephen Moffat was obviously writing the Day of the Doctor, so he wasn't going to write the Day of the Doctor and Twice Upon a Time. So that's why Paul Cornell got pulled in to do that one. Although interestingly, and potentially the reason for a lot of my personal issues with this book, the novelization was released 4 months after Twice Upon a Time, and was actually written a couple months before Twice Upon a Time was released. So Paul Cornell, as said in issue 524 of Doctor Who magazine, that he had basically just the scripts to go off of. But I mean, that being said, like, I feel like with just the scripts, you still somehow wouldn't have had he was able to see it before Christmas, before it was released, but I think apparently he only went back to change minor things, which is insane how he's managed to put emphasis on exactly the same parts. Like, perhaps that's how Stephen Moffat wrote it in the shooting scripts. But again, like, it seems, I don't know why it was chosen. I guess it was because it was the most recent episode at that time when those ones released. But why? And apparently he took inspiration from Terrance Dick's like famous novelizations of Doctor Who stories, specifically Terror of the Autons, and the kind of unique, memorable character descriptions in that one, which you don't get in this book. I don't know how he's inspired by these books, but then he specifically notes the kind of in-depth, unique character descriptions that Terrance Dicks gives in his novelizations, and then doesn't do those. I don't really understand. I've got nothing against Paul Cornell. I love Human Nature and The Family of Blood, and I appreciate the work that he's done. I just don't know how he's done so bad here. I don't usually like to be negative about these sorts of things, but at the end of the day, I mean, people have differing opinions on the episode. I think generally it's pretty positive. When I first watched it, I wasn't actually a massive fan of it, and I've kind of come around to it. I don't think it's amazing by any means, but I think it's a nice epilogue for the 12th Doctor. But here, like, I don't know what's happened. Some iconic moments are even shortened and simplified, such as the big meeting in the Chamber of the Dead, where Testimony is listing off the names of the Doctors. It's meant to be this big moment of realization of the first Doctor and kind of who he's going to become. It's like half a page or a page, and you do not get that. You do not get these big moments. Sometimes you have like these, Twice Upon a Time is kind of like just an episode of moments, and some of them are like 2 sentences long. It doesn't make any sense. And the regeneration is like, I mean, you've picked a regeneration story, you should be able to expand like in good detail about the regeneration, and it's so dull. Obviously, Peter Capaldi carries that regeneration, and the directing from Rachel Talalay, of course, makes it beautiful. But here, you don't get that whatsoever. It's almost like a synopsis of what's happening in the episode. I think specifically the 13th Doctor's first moments in this book don't feel deserved. What I mean by that is that the 13 doesn't know who she is in The Woman Who Fell to Earth. I mean, that's shown by the fact that the title is The Woman. I mean, whether that's referring to Grace or her, it doesn't really matter, but she is the woman, right? She doesn't know that she's the Doctor until the end, as I do a lot of Doctor Who kind of first stories. They don't really know that they're the Doctor until towards the end of the episode, whereas Paul Cornell just rattles off the name, the Doctor does this, the Doctor does that, the Doctor is blah, 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 blah. I'm like, she doesn't even know who she is, but it portrayed here, it's like she does, and he's like, the Doctor does this and presses this button and this happens, and she's so confused. I'm like, the Doctor doesn't know where she is. The Doctor is completely lost. It makes no, she's not the Doctor, right? She's the woman, basically. And it would have been interesting if he referred to her as the woman or something other than the Doctor, basically, because it doesn't feel like, I don't know, it doesn't feel deserved, like I said. So yeah, I mean, really, the only positives of this novelization is the material that's already provided. And like I said, it's very similar to the downfalls of Planet of the Ood. And Planet of the Ood, I don't particularly enjoy as an episode. I mean, it's okay, like there's moments in it that are okay, but I don't particularly rewatch Planet of the Ood as much as I would Twice Upon a Time. Obviously, I've compared the novelizations of Planet of the Ood and Twice Upon a Time quite a lot here, and even because of that, I will be giving them pretty much the same score. I'm giving Twice Upon a Time by Paul Cornell a 4 out of 10. I would be giving it less if I just didn't, in general, quite like Twice Upon a Time as a story. Planet of the Ood, I'm not as a massive fan of. I still like a lot of the moments in Planet of the Ood, don't get me wrong, and the book kind of falls short of that. But Twice Upon a Time is just the episode, as much as Planet of the Ood novelization is just the episode. So I'd say the only reason Twice Upon a Time is at the same rating as Planet of the Ood is just because of the story, but in general, I'd say the writing actually maybe even falls short of Planet of the Ood. I have to say the run of these past few novelizations hasn't been great. The Eaters of Light was even worse than that one. The Zygon Invasion was fine. It hasn't been very good since the Day of the Doctor. Hopefully, Kablam by Pete McTighe can maybe get over 6.